The North Tower had no warmth, no light, and no love, only the sound of rain hammering against stone and the whimpering of a small, wet pup curled in the corner. King Malphaz refused to look at his son. To do so was to acknowledge failure, and failure had no place in the Blood Moon Kingdom. The boy's scent, that nauseating mixture of decay and despair, confirmed what the High Priestess had whispered 3 years ago. "Accursed one walks among your bloodline, my king. The gods have turned their faces away." But Selith, a maid barely 2 months in service, knew nothing of curses or royal shame. She only saw a shivering child, abandoned in his own filth after guards left him in the rain as punishment for crying. When she lifted the pup from the cold floor, his amber eyes met hers with a wisdom that shouldn't exist in one so young. "You smell like kindness," he whispered, the first words he'd spoken in weeks. She carried him to the washroom, defying every rule, and reached for the one thing that might help, her grandmother's soap, infused with silver herbs and moonflower oil. As the lather touched his matted fur, something extraordinary began to happen. The water turned black, then shimmering with dark iridescence, as if washing away not dirt but something far more sinister. And then the smell hit her, a scent so powerful, so ancient, that it drove her to her knees in instinctive submission. The real Amarok was awakening. Before we dive into Amarok's story, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because this tale of betrayal, magic, and redemption is one you won't want to miss a single moment of. Now, let's begin. The North Tower had been Amarok's entire world for as long as he could remember, 3 years that felt like 30. Cold stone walls wept with moisture, and the single window offered no comfort, only a view of the kingdom that had rejected him. He sat in the corner now, small paws wrapped around his knees, trying to make himself even smaller. Perhaps if he took up less space, they would forget he existed. But they never forgot. The smell wouldn't let them. It clung to him like a second skin, that nauseating mixture of rotting earth and stagnant water. Even he could smell it, though he'd grown somewhat used to the way his own presence made his stomach turn. The servant said it was the scent of failure, of cursed blood, of everything wrong with the world made manifest in a single pup. Heavy footsteps echoed up the tower stairs, and Amarok's ears flattened against his head. He knew those footsteps. They belonged to the one wolf whose rejection hurt more than all the others combined. King Malphaz filled the doorway, but he didn't enter. He never entered. Instead, he stood at the threshold, one hand covering his nose, his golden eyes filled with something between disgust and disappointment. Behind him, 2 guards flanked the entrance, their faces twisted in barely concealed revulsion. 3 weeks, Malphaz said, his voice cold and formal. In 3 weeks you turn 4, old enough to survive on your own in the wild as per our laws. Amarok said nothing. What could he say? He'd learned long ago that speaking only made things worse. "The arrangements have been made," the king continued, still refusing to step into the room. "You'll be taken to the Deadwood Forest at dawn on your birthday. The guards will give you a day's head start before they release the hunting party, as tradition demands for those like you." "Father, Amarok's small voice cracked. "Don't call me that." The words were sharp as broken glass. "A father raises an heir. I have raised nothing but shame." Malphaz turned away, then paused. "High Priestess Vora has confirmed it again today. Your scent grows stronger, more putrid. You're a cursed one, boy. The longer you remain within these walls, the more you poison everything around you. This is mercy." The king descended the stairs without another word, leaving Amarok alone with the 2 guards. They exchanged glances, and one of them, a scarred brute named Garrett, smiled with cruel amusement. "Hear that little curse?" Garrett stepped into the room, despite the smell. 3 more weeks of your whimpering. Thought we'd help you prepare for the wild." Before Amarok could react, rough hands grabbed him and hauled him toward the window. The storm outside had been raging for hours, turning the courtyard below into a maze of puddles and mud. "No, please," Amarok struggled, but he was so small, so weak. "Wolves don't beg," the other guard, Marcus, laughed. "Then again, you're not really a wolf, are you?" They shoved him out onto the narrow ledge beyond the window, where rain lashed at him with icy fury. The drop was 20 feet to the courtyard below, not enough to kill, but enough to hurt. Amarok clung to the slick stone, his small claws scrabbling for purchase. "Stay out here for a few hours," Garrett called over the storm. "Maybe the rain will wash away some of that stench, though I doubt even a flood could clean something as rotten as you." The window slammed shut, and Amarok heard the bolt slide into place. He pressed himself against the tower wall, shivering violently as rain soaked through his fur. The ledge was barely wide enough for his small frame, and one slip would send him tumbling to the stones below. Time became meaningless. There was only cold, only rain, only the desperate effort to hold on. His muscles screamed, his claws bled from gripping the rough stone, but he didn't fall. Falling would be giving up, and something deep inside him, something that even 3 years of cruelty hadn't quite extinguished, refused to surrender. When they finally pulled him back inside hours later, throwing him onto the cold floor like a wet rag, Amarok could barely move. The guards laughed as they left, their entertainment concluded for the evening. He lay there in a puddle of rainwater and his own blood, the foul scent radiating from him stronger than ever. The smell of failure. The smell of everything he was supposed to be but wasn't. Somewhere far below, in the king's private chambers, Malphaz stood before High Priestess Vora. The woman was ancient, her silver fur marked with ritual scars, her eyes milky with what she claimed was divine sight. "You're certain this is necessary?" Malphaz asked, though his tone suggested he'd already accepted the answer. Vora placed a gnarled hand on his shoulder. "My king, I have seen the threads of fate. That child carries a darkness that will consume the Blood Moon Kingdom if allowed to mature. The scent is merely the most obvious sign. Beneath it lies something far more dangerous. Accursed one's power grows with age, twisting everything it touches." "He's just a pup." "Now, yes, but in a year, 5 years, 10. Vora's voice dropped to a whisper. "I've consulted the ancient texts, performed the sacred rituals. Every vision shows the same ending. If Amarok remains, the kingdom falls. Your line ends. Darkness swallows everything." Malphaz's jaw clenched. "Then exile is mercy." "Exile is survival," Vora corrected. "Not just his, but ours. You are making the hard choice that true kings must make. Sacrifice one to save thousands." The king nodded slowly, but something in his chest twisted, a pain he couldn't quite name. He pushed it down, buried it beneath duty and necessity. A king couldn't afford weakness, and love for a cursed child was the most dangerous weakness of all. As Vora left his chambers, a satisfied smile crossed her ancient face. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned. In 3 weeks, the true threat to her own son's claim would be removed forever, exiled to die in the wilderness where no one would ever discover what he truly was. The next morning, a new maid arrived at the castle gates. She was young, barely 20, with soft gray fur and eyes that held unusual depth. The head housekeeper looked her over with skepticism. "You're the one from the northern villages, the one they sent as tribute." "Selith, ma'am," the young woman said, bowing her head respectfully. "My grandmother served in the royal household many years ago. I hope to honor her memory." "Well, you'll be starting in the worst posting in the castle," the housekeeper sniffed. "The North Tower, there's a situation up there. No one else wants the duty." Selith noticed the way the other servants exchanged glances, the mixture of pity and relief on their faces. She clutched the small wooden box she carried tighter, her grandmother's final gift, given with trembling hands and urgent words. "I'll do whatever is needed," Selith said simply. As she climbed the stairs toward the North Tower that first day, she caught the scent everyone had warned her about. It was indeed foul enough to make her eyes water, but beneath it, or perhaps beyond it, she sensed something else. Something that made the small hairs on her neck rise not with revulsion, but with recognition. Her grandmother's final words echoed in her mind. "When you find the one who smells of death but radiates life, when darkness has taken a false shape, that is when you'll know. That is when the old soap must be used." Selith reached the top of the stairs and saw, through the cracked door, a small pup huddled in the corner, covered in mud and blood and rainwater, but with eyes that held more awareness than any 3-year-old should possess. The moment had come, though she didn't yet fully understand it. Seleth had been warned not to touch him. The head housekeeper's instructions had been explicit. Leave food at the door. Change the water bucket once daily. Do not, under any circumstances, make physical contact with the cursed one. The contamination could spread. But standing in the doorway of the North Tower room on her third day, Seleth couldn't reconcile those orders with what she saw before her. The pup lay motionless on the stone floor, his small chest rising and falling in shallow, rapid breaths. Mud caked his fur so thickly it was impossible to tell what color he actually was. Blood had dried in dark streaks along his paws and legs. His eyes were closed, but even unconscious, his face was contorted in pain. "Hello," Seleth called softly, setting down the tray of food she'd brought. "Can you hear me?" No response. She took a step closer, and the smell hit her like a physical blow, that rotting, stagnant odor everyone had described. Her stomach lurched, but she forced herself to breathe through her mouth and move forward. Kneeling beside the pup, she placed a hand on his forehead. He was burning with fever, his skin so hot beneath the matted fur that she jerked her hand back in shock. How long had he been like this? Had anyone even checked on him? "Poor thing," she whispered. "What have they done to you?" His eyes fluttered open at her voice, amber eyes that seemed to glow even in the dim light. They fixed on her face with an intensity that made her breath catch. There was intelligence there, awareness, and something else that chilled her: resignation. This child expected nothing from her but more pain. "I won't hurt you," Seleth said gently. "My name is Seleth. What's yours?" Amarok." His voice was barely audible, cracked and dry. "You should. Go away, the smell. It hurts people." "I'm still here, aren't I?" She tried to smile, though her heart was breaking. "When did you last have water?" He didn't answer, which was answer enough. Seleth looked around the sparse room and found the water bucket in the corner, empty except for a thin layer of ice. The window was still partially open from the storm 2 nights ago, and frost had formed on the interior walls. They'd left a sick child in a room barely above freezing. Something hardened in Seleth's chest, a determination she'd inherited from her grandmother, along with that mysterious wooden box. This was wrong. Royal decree or not, cursed or not, this was a child suffering needlessly. "Can you stand?" she asked. Amarok shook his head weakly. "Then I'll carry you." She slid her arms beneath him, trying to ignore the foulness of the smell, the way his fever seemed to radiate through her clothes. He was so light, too light for a pup his age. "We're going to get you clean and warm." "No," he protested feebly. "The housekeeper said no one is allowed to." "The housekeeper isn't here." Seleth adjusted her grip and stood, cradling him against her chest. "And I don't take orders very well. My grandmother always said it was my worst quality." She carried him down the tower stairs, half expecting guards to stop her at any moment. But the corridors were empty. No one wanted to be near the North Tower if they could help it. She made her way to the servants' washroom, a small chamber with a large copper tub and a fireplace that was, mercifully, still burning low. Setting Amarok down gently on a bench, Seleth began heating water. The pup watched her with those haunting eyes, silent now, as if he'd used up all his strength on that brief protest. "My grandmother was a maid here once," Seleth said as she worked, filling the tub with warm water. 60 years ago, before I was born, she used to tell me stories about the castle, about the old ways, about things that have been forgotten." She tested the water temperature. "She gave me something before she died, said I'd know when to use it." She retrieved the wooden box from where she'd hidden it in her apron pocket. The wood was ancient, carved with symbols she didn't fully understand, moons and wolves, and something that might have been stars or flowers. Inside, wrapped in oiled cloth, was a bar of soap unlike any she'd ever seen. It was pale gray-green, shot through with silver veins, and it smelled of herbs and moonlight and something wild. "The old soap must be used when darkness has taken a false shape," Seleth murmured, repeating her grandmother's words. She'd puzzled over that phrase for weeks, wondering what it meant. Looking at Amarok now, at the foulness that surrounded him like a visible miasma, something clicked into place. What if the darkness wasn't coming from him? What if it was covering him? "Let's get you in the water," she said, moving to lift him. "Everyone says I smell wrong." Amarok's voice was so small, so broken. "Will you hate me too?" Selith froze, her hands on his thin shoulders. Those words, spoken with such absolute certainty of rejection, struck her deeper than any smell could. This child had been taught that his very existence was offensive, that he deserved isolation and suffering. "No," she said firmly, looking directly into his eyes. "I will not hate you. You smell like someone who needs help, and that's exactly what you're going to get." She lifted him into the tub, and he didn't resist. The water immediately turned murky as mud began to dissolve from his fur. He sat there, shivering despite the warmth, watching her with an expression somewhere between hope and disbelief. Selith unwrapped the strange soap and dipped it into the water. The moment it touched the surface, something shifted in the air, a subtle change in pressure, like the feeling before a storm breaks. She began to work the soap through his matted fur, starting with his back. The lather was strange, producing foam that seemed to shimmer with an inner light. And as she scrubbed, she noticed something odd. The dirt wasn't just washing away. There was something else coming off him, something that caught the light like oil on water, something that moved with unnatural fluidity. "Does this hurt?" she asked, working the soap through the thick patches of matted fur around his neck. "No," Amarok said, and for the first time there was wonder in his voice. "It feels warm, good." The water was turning darker now, but not the brown of regular dirt. It was black, shot through with iridescent swirls of purple and green. The foul smell was intensifying, becoming almost unbearable, but Selith kept scrubbing. Something told her she needed to see this through, that stopping now would be worse than not starting at all. "My grandmother said this soap was made by the old ones," Selith said, as much to distract herself from the smell as to comfort the pup. "She said it could wash away more than just dirt, that it could reveal truth." "What kind of truth?" Amarok asked, his child's curiosity breaking through his usual guarded silence. "I suppose we're about to find out." She moved to his head, working the soap carefully around his ears and down his neck. The black substance in the water was growing thicker, rising to the surface like scum. And beneath her hands, she felt something strange. The texture of his fur was changing, becoming softer, cleaner in a way that went beyond the removal of dirt. Then the smell began to change. It didn't fade gradually. One moment it was there, overwhelming and nauseating, and the next it simply stopped, vanished as if it had never existed. In its place came something else, something that made Selith's hands still on Amarok's shoulders. The new scent was faint at first, but growing stronger with each passing second. It smelled of fire and forest, of ancient trees and star-filled skies, of power so vast and primal that her wolf instinct screamed at her to submit, to kneel, to acknowledge the presence of something far greater than herself. "What?" Amarok's voice trembled. "What's happening?" Selith looked down at the water and saw that the black substance was dissolving, breaking apart into nothing. And the pup in front of her, he was beginning to glow, a soft golden light emanating from his skin, growing brighter with each heartbeat. "I don't know," she whispered, though somewhere deep inside, she suspected her grandmother had known exactly what would happen. "But I think you were never cursed at all." The light grew stronger, and somewhere far below them, in the depths of the castle, wolves began to howl, a sound of recognition, of awakening, of something ancient stirring after a long sleep. The wooden box slipped from Selith's fingers and clattered on the stone floor, forgotten. Everything was about to change. The golden light pulsing from Amarok's skin grew brighter, and Selith realized with growing alarm that this was beyond anything her grandmother's stories had prepared her for. The water in the tub had turned completely black, so dark it seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, and the iridescent swirls on its surface moved with deliberate purpose, as if alive. "Selith," Amarok's voice was small and frightened. "I feel strange, my skin, it's tingling." "Stay still," she managed, though her own hands were shaking. The air in the washroom had grown thick, charged with an energy that made her fur stand on end. It felt like being inside a thundercloud moments before lightning struck. As she continued washing, the dark film that had been clinging to his fur began to peel away in larger pieces. It wasn't dissolving anymore. It was separating, pulling back like a second skin being shed. The pieces floated on the water's surface, writhing and twisting before finally dissipating into wisps of black smoke. "What is that?" Amarok stared at the dark fragments with wide eyes. "I don't know," Selith admitted, "but whatever it is, it doesn't belong on you." She scrubbed harder now, working the silver-veined soap into every inch of fur she could reach. The more she cleaned, the more of the film came away, and with each piece that separated, the light from Amarok's skin intensified. It wasn't just glowing anymore, it was radiating, pushing back the shadows in the room until the washroom blazed as bright as midday. Then the smell changed. For one horrible moment, the foul stench of rot and stagnation intensified tenfold. Selith gagged, her eyes watering, barely able to keep working. It was as if 3 years of concentrated decay had been released all at once, filling the small room with a miasma so thick she could taste it. "Make it stop," Amarok whimpered, covering his nose with his small paws. "Please make it stop." "Almost there," Selith choked out, fighting her own urge to flee. "Just hold on." She rinsed the last patch of dark film from behind his ears, and the moment the final piece separated and dissolved, everything changed. The foul smell vanished. Not faded, vanished. One heartbeat it was suffocating them, and the next it was simply gone, as if it had never existed. The sudden absence was so complete that Selith gasped, drawing in a deep breath of clean air. But the air wasn't empty. A new scent rolled through the washroom like an invisible wave, and it hit Selith with the force of a physical blow. Her knees buckled, and she found herself dropping to the wet stone floor, her head bowing automatically, her wolf spirit responding to something it recognized on an instinctual level. The scent was indescribable, fire that didn't burn, ancient forests untouched by time, starlight made tangible, power so pure and absolute that it needed no announcement. It spoke directly to the most primal part of her, the part that remembered the old ways, the old hierarchies, the old truths. This was the scent of an alpha. Not just any alpha, a primal alpha, the first alpha, the one from which all others descended. "Selith," Amarok's voice had changed, layered now with a resonance that vibrated through her bones. "Why are you on the floor?" She couldn't answer, couldn't move. Every instinct screamed at her to stay down, to show submission, to acknowledge the presence of something far greater than herself. The light surrounding Amarok grew impossibly brighter, golden and fierce, and she saw through squinted eyes that his fur, now clean for the first time in his life, was a brilliant silver white, shot through with streaks of gold that seemed to move like living fire. His eyes blazed with amber light so intense they appeared molten. And then the castle responded. It started with a single howl, distant and uncertain, coming from somewhere in the lower levels. Then another joined it, and another, until the entire castle erupted in a chorus of wolf voices raised in a call they didn't understand but couldn't resist. Guards, servants, nobles, every wolf within the castle walls found themselves howling, compelled by something ancient and undeniable. The sound was deafening, echoing through stone corridors and spiraling up towers, a symphony of recognition that hadn't been heard in 1,000 years. Amarok stood up in the tub, water streaming from his fur, and the golden light pulsed outward in waves. Where it touched the walls, ancient runes that had been hidden under centuries of paint and plaster began to glow with matching radiance. The stones themselves seemed to remember what they'd been built to house. "What's happening to me?" Amarok looked down at his paws, at the light radiating from his skin, at his reflection in the water. No longer the muddy, cursed creature he'd always known, but something magnificent and terrifying. "You're being revealed," Selith whispered, still on her knees. "The real you, the you that was always there." The door to the washroom burst open. 2 guards stumbled in, their hands on their weapons, but the moment they crossed the threshold, the scent hit them. Both dropped to their knees instantly, their swords clattering on the stone floor, their heads bowing in involuntary submission. "By the old gods," one of them gasped. "What is that smell? I have to." "Sound the alarm," the other managed to say, his voice strained with the effort of speaking while every fiber of his being screamed at him to submit. "Get the king! Get everyone!" More footsteps thundered down the corridor. The howling continued, growing louder, more insistent. Wolves were converging on the washroom from every corner of the castle, drawn by the scent, compelled by forces they couldn't name or resist. Selith finally managed to raise her head enough to look at Amarok. The pup stood in the center of the tub, water still dripping from his transformed fur, looking both terrified and strangely calm. For 3 years he'd been told he was wrong, broken, cursed. Now, in the space of minutes, everything had inverted. "I don't understand," Amarok said, looking at the kneeling guards, at Selith still on the floor, at the glowing runes on the walls. "Why is everyone—" "Because you're not cursed," Selith said, finding her voice though she still couldn't stand. "You never were. Someone put that darkness on you, hid what you really are. And what you really are is—" "Impossible," a new voice cut through the chaos. High Priestess Vora stood in the doorway, her ancient face twisted with an emotion somewhere between shock and fury. Unlike the guards, she remained standing, though Selith could see the effort it cost her. The priestess's hands glowed with dark energy, some kind of magic that allowed her to resist the overwhelming urge to submit. "This isn't possible," Vora repeated, her milky eyes fixed on Amarok with an intensity that bordered on hatred. "The shroud should have held. I bound it with blood and shadow and—" She caught herself, but too late. "You," Selith breathed, understanding flooding through her. "You did this to him." The priestess's face went blank, carefully neutral, but her hands clenched into fists. "I did what was necessary, what the prophecies demanded. This power cannot be allowed to—" A roar echoed through the corridor, cutting off her words. It was a sound of pure rage, of authority challenged, of a king who had just heard something that shattered his world. King Malphaz was coming. The golden light pulsing from Amarok intensified, responding to the approach of his father, and the very stones of the castle groaned as if bearing weight they'd forgotten how to carry. The scent of starfire and ancient oak rolled outward in another wave, stronger than before, and throughout the Blood Moon Kingdom, wolves stopped what they were doing and turned toward the castle, their hearts recognizing something their minds couldn't explain. The primal alpha had awakened, and nothing would ever be the same. King Malphaz took the stairs 3 at a time, his elite guards struggling to keep pace. Rage burned through his veins like molten iron. Someone had defied direct orders, touched the Cursed One, and now the entire castle had descended into chaos. Wolves were howling uncontrollably, guards had abandoned their posts, and half his court was on their knees for reasons no one could explain. "Who gave the order?" he snarled at Captain Thuron, who ran beside him. "Who authorized anyone to enter that room?" "No one, my king," Thuron panted. "It was the new maid, Selith. She took the boy to the servants' washroom without permission." "Then she dies." Malphaz's claws extended as he ran, silver-tipped and wickedly sharp. "And if the contamination has spread, we burn that entire wing of the castle." They rounded the final corner, and Malphaz saw the crowd gathered outside the washroom. Guards, servants, even some of the lesser nobles, all pressed against the walls as if trying to get as far from the doorway as possible while still being drawn toward it. Their faces showed confusion and something else, primal fear mixed with awe. "Move," Malphaz roared, and they scattered before him like leaves in a storm. He stormed toward the washroom entrance, murder in his heart and righteous fury driving his steps. That cursed whelp had been the bane of his existence for 3 years, a constant reminder of failure, and now some foolish maid had. The scent hit him. Malphaz froze mid-step, one foot still raised, his entire body locking up as if he'd been turned to stone. It poured through the doorway like an invisible flood, a scent so powerful, so fundamentally commanding that his wolf spirit recognized it before his conscious mind could process what was happening. Starfire and ancient oak. The legendary scent of the primal alpha. No, he whispered, but his body was already responding. His knees buckled, hitting the stone floor with a crack that sent pain shooting up his legs. His head bowed automatically, neck exposed in the ultimate gesture of submission. Behind him, his elite guard, warriors who had never knelt to anyone but him, dropped as one, their weapons clattering to the ground. "My king," Thuron's voice was strained, confused. "I can't, why am I?" Malphaz couldn't answer. Every fiber of his being was screaming at him to submit, to acknowledge, to bow before something greater than himself. It was like trying to stand in a hurricane, like fighting gravity itself. His wolf spirit had taken control, responding to instincts older than civilization, older than memory. He forced his head up, fighting against every cell in his body, and looked into the washroom. The golden light was blinding. For a moment, he could see nothing but radiance, pure and absolute. Then his eyes adjusted, and he saw the small figure standing in the copper tub at the center of the room. Amarok. But not the Amarok he knew. The matted fur was gone, replaced by silver white that gleamed like starlight, streaked with gold that moved and flowed like living flame. The pup was still small, still just 3 years old, but he radiated power that made the air itself tremble. His eyes, those amber eyes that Malphaz had always avoided, blazed with an inner fire that seemed to pierce straight through flesh and bone to the soul beneath. The foul stench was gone. In its place was that overwhelming scent of the primal alpha, the scent that was forcing the most powerful wolves in the kingdom to their knees. "Impossible," Malphaz breathed. "You were cursed, you were." "A lie," High Priestess Vora said from somewhere to his left. He couldn't turn to look at her, couldn't take his eyes off his son. "Everything was a lie, my king. The shroud I placed on him, the false scent, the prophecies I fed you. All of it designed to make you reject him, exile him, remove him before he could." Before he could what? Malphaz's voice was barely recognizable, twisted by rage and dawning horror. "Before he could claim what is rightfully his," Vora finished. "The primal alpha bloodline, the power that makes all others kneel, the strength that would have made him unstoppable." Amarok stepped out of the tub, water streaming from his transformed fur. The movement was graceful despite his young age, and with each step he took, the golden light pulsed stronger. He walked toward his father, not with aggression, but with the careful curiosity of a child who had never been allowed close before. "Father," the word was soft, questioning, but layered with that resonance that made the stones vibrate in sympathy. "Is that really you?" Malphaz tried to speak and found his throat had closed. 3 years. 3 years of contempt, of cruelty, of planning this child's death, and all along. "Why do I feel strong now?" Amarok asked, tilting his head. His voice held genuine confusion, the innocence of someone who didn't yet understand what had been done to him. "What was wrong with me before?" The question shattered something in Malphaz's chest. Wrong. The boy thought something had been wrong with him, had internalized 3 years of rejection and abuse, believed himself worthy of it, accepted that he was cursed and broken and deserving of exile. "Nothing," Malphaz choked out, the word torn from him. "Nothing was wrong with you." "But you said," Amarok's glowing eyes were wide, uncertain. "You said I was cursed, that my smell was poison, that I was making the kingdom weak." "I was wrong." The admission felt like swallowing broken glass. Malphaz remained on his knees, unable to rise even if he'd wanted to. His wolf spirit wouldn't allow it, not in the presence of the primal alpha. "By all the gods, I was wrong." Selith, still kneeling near the tub, finally found her voice. "The darkness on him wasn't natural, your majesty. It was placed there, bound to him with magic." Malphaz's head snapped toward Vora. The high priestess stood near the door, the only one still on her feet, dark magic crackling around her hands in a visible shield against the overwhelming urge to submit. "You," he growled, "you did this. You told me he was cursed, that the scent proved it, that keeping him here would destroy us all." "And I was right," Vora hissed, her ancient face twisted with desperation. "Look at the power radiating from him. He's 3 years old and already forcing every wolf in the castle to submission. What do you think he'll be capable of in 10 years? 20? He'll be a tyrant, a monster, unstoppable, and... "He's my son," Malphaz roared, the sound echoing off the walls. "My son, and you turned me against him, made me torture him, abandon him, plan his murder." "I saved your kingdom," Vora insisted. "The primal alpha bloodline was destroyed for a reason. That much power concentrated in one being, it corrupts, it consumes, It terrified you," Amarok said quietly, and everyone fell silent. The pup, the primal alpha, looked at Vora with those burning amber eyes. "You were afraid of me, but why? I never hurt anyone, I just wanted." His voice cracked, revealing the child beneath the power. "I just wanted my father to love me." The words hung in the air, like an executioner's blade. Malphaz felt something break inside him, some final wall that had been holding back the full weight of what he'd done. He saw it all in brutal clarity. The nights he'd left Amarok alone in the cold, the times he'd refused to even enter the room, the casual cruelty of the guards he'd allowed to continue unchecked, the plans for exile that were really plans for murder. And for what? A lie, a conspiracy, a high priestess's manipulations. "Amarok," he whispered, his voice breaking. "My son, You hurt me." The simple statement was more devastating than any accusation. "Every day you hurt me, and I tried to be good, tried to be quiet, tried not to smell bad anymore, but nothing worked." "Because it was never you," Malphaz said, tears streaming down his face now, his pride abandoned in the face of his guilt. "The wrongness was never you. It was placed on you, hidden on you, and I believed it. I saw what I was told to see instead of seeing you." Captain Thuron, still on his knees beside his king, spoke up. "My king, the scent. What she did to him. That's dark magic, blood magic. That's punishable by..." "Death," Malphaz finished, his eyes never leaving his son. "High Priestess Vora, you are accused of using forbidden magic against the royal heir, of conspiracy against the crown, of protecting this kingdom from the same fate that befell the ancients." Vora's composure finally cracked. "You don't understand what you've unleashed. The primal alphas didn't disappear because they were weak. They disappeared because their power made them gods, and gods have no mercy." Amarok took another step toward his father, and Malphaz saw something that broke his heart further. Hope. Despite everything, despite 3 years of torment, the child still hoped his father might love him. "I don't want to be a god," Amarok said softly. "I just want to be your son." The golden light pulsed once more, and somewhere deep in the castle, something ancient stirred. A response to the primal alpha's presence, to power that hadn't walked these halls in a millennium. The truth had been revealed, but the real reckoning was only beginning. High Priestess Vora's hands trembled as she watched her carefully constructed world crumble. 3 years of planning, of whispered lies, of dark rituals performed in secret, all undone by a maid with an old bar of soap. The malefic shroud that should have lasted until the boy's exile now lay dissolved in a copper tub. And the power she'd spent so long suppressing blazed for all to see. But she hadn't survived 60 years in the royal court by surrendering at the first setback. "My king," she said, her voice taking on the resonant quality she used for pronouncements of divine will. "Step away from the creature. What you're witnessing is not your son. It's a demonic possession taking hold." Malphaz, still on his knees, turned his head slowly to look at her. His eyes held a dangerous light. "You just admitted you placed the shroud on him, that you lied to me for 3 years." "To protect him," Vora's voice rose, taking on an edge of desperation she couldn't quite hide. "The shroud was meant to contain the demon seed until he was old enough to fight it off. Don't you see? This power, this unnatural scent, it's not natural. No wolf should force others to submission just by existing." "The primal alphas did," Captain Thuron said quietly from his position on the floor. "The old stories speak of it. Their presence alone could bring entire packs to their knees." "Legends," Vora spat. "Children's tales meant to." "This is no demon." Selith's voice cut through the priestess's protests. The young maid remained kneeling, her head still bowed, but her words rang with conviction. "This is the primal alpha. The scent cannot be faked. It's written in his very essence, in his blood, in the core of what he is." Vora's milky eyes fixed on the maid with sudden, intense focus. "And what would you know of such things, girl? You're nothing but a—" She stopped abruptly, her nostrils flaring as she drew in a breath. "Moonwhisper, your Moonwhisper clan." The revelation sent a ripple through the assembled wolves. The Moonwhisper clan had been thought extinct, hunted down and destroyed alongside the primal alphas a millennium ago. "My grandmother was the last," Selith said, raising her head to meet Vora's gaze. "She taught me the old ways before she died, including how to recognize dark magic when I see it." She gestured to the black residue still clinging to the sides of the tub. "That shroud wasn't protection, it was suppression. Concealment. You hid what he was to serve your own purposes." Lies, but Vora's mask was slipping, cracks showing in her carefully maintained composure. "The girl is clearly in league with whatever demon has possessed the boy. My king, you must act now, before the entity completes its manifestation." "What entity?" Amarok's small voice, still layered with that ancient resonance, held genuine confusion. "I don't feel possessed, I just feel like me, but without the heavy thing that was always pressing down on me." Vora took a step back, and for just a moment, barely a heartbeat, her expression shifted. The mask of concerned spirituality fell away, revealing something underneath that was cold and calculating and filled with murderous rage. Her eyes locked on Amarok with such hatred that several of the guards gasped. Then the mask snapped back into place, but everyone had seen it. "You want him dead," Malphaz said, his voice deadly quiet. "Not exiled, not contained, dead. I want to save this kingdom from the same fate that destroyed the ancients." Vora's composure was fracturing now, her voice rising to a near shriek. "The primal alphas nearly ended our entire species. Their power grew until they saw other wolves as nothing but tools, slaves, playthings. They slaughtered any who questioned them, bred only with those they deemed worthy, culled the weak like cattle." "That was 1,000 years ago," Thuron said, "and the histories are unclear about what actually—" "I was there," the words exploded from Vora, and suddenly the washroom fell into shocked silence. "Not personally, but through the memories passed down through my bloodline. We were the ones who ended them, who freed the wolf clans from their tyranny. My ancestors sacrificed everything to ensure no primal alpha would ever rise again." "Then you admit it," Malphaz said. "You've been working against my son from the moment he was born." "I've been working to prevent history from repeating." Vora's hands blazed with dark energy, the shadows around her deepening and twisting. "And if you won't do what's necessary, then I will." She raised her hands, dark magic coalescing into visible tendrils that reached toward Amarok. But before they could strike, Selith threw herself in front of the pup, and the magic recoiled from her as if hitting an invisible barrier. "The Moonwhisper are guardians of the primal bloodline," Selith said, her voice steady despite her fear. "Our very essence repels your corrupted magic." Vora snarled and reached into her robes, pulling out a carved bone whistle. She blew a note too high for human ears but perfectly pitched for wolves. Within seconds, footsteps thundered down the corridor, not the regular castle guards, but the priestess's personal guard, 20 wolves handpicked for their loyalty to her alone. They burst into the washroom, weapons drawn, and immediately took positions around Vora. Their leader, a scarred female named Kess, looked at the scene with confusion, the king on his knees, the elite guard bowing, and a glowing pup at the center of it all. "High Priestess," Kess asked uncertainly. "The king has been compromised by demonic influence," Vora announced, her voice once again taking on that resonant quality of divine authority. "The creature in the tub has possessed his mind. I am invoking the sacred mandate. When the ruler falls to darkness, the spiritual leader must act to preserve the realm." "That's not a real law," Thuron protested, but several of the priestess's guards moved to block the doorway. The room divided. On one side, Vora and her 20 guards, weapons ready. On the other, Malphaz still on his knees, his elite guard similarly unable to rise, Selith protecting Amarok, and a handful of servants too shocked to move. The scent of the primal alpha continued to pour through the room, forcing submission from everyone except Vora, whose dark magic formed a visible shield around her. "Stand down, Vora," Malphaz commanded, though his position on the floor robbed the words of their usual authority. This is treason. This is salvation. Vora's eyes were wild now, all pretense abandoned. You don't understand what he'll become. The power will corrupt him. It always does. Better to end it now while he's still young, still weak enough to kill. I'm not weak. Amarok's voice rang out, and the golden light around him pulsed brighter. You made me think I was, but I'm not. I'm strong. I've always been strong. The stones beneath their feet trembled. The ancient runes on the walls blazed brighter. And throughout the castle, wolves felt a pull they couldn't explain. A call to come, to witness, to choose sides in a conflict that would determine the kingdom's future. Kes, Vora ordered, kill the child now. The scarred guard hesitated, looking between her priestess and the glowing pup. High priestess, the scent. It's making me want to. Fight it! Vora's hands crackled with more dark magic, and she placed a hand on Kes's shoulder. The same shielding energy that protected the priestess flowed into the guard. I'm giving you the strength to resist. Now do your duty. Kes gritted her teeth and raised her sword, taking a step toward Amarok. The other guards, seeing their leader move, began to advance as well. Malphaz roared in fury, trying desperately to rise but still pinned by his instinctive submission to the primal alpha. Stop! Amarok's voice cracked like thunder, and the golden light exploded outward in a shockwave of pure power. Every wolf in the room, except Vora, protected by her dark magic, was thrown to the ground. Weapons clattered from nerveless hands. The ancient runes on the walls blazed so bright they became painful to look at. And from deep beneath the castle, something answered the primal alpha's call. A sound like grinding stone echoed through the foundations. The floor split open in a thin line, and from the crack rose a blue-white light that predated even the castle itself. No, Vora whispered, her face going pale. The awakening stone. It can't still be active. It was supposed to be dead, drained, useless after the last primal fell. But the light continued to rise, responding to Amarok's presence, recognizing what it had been built to serve. The choice had been made. The castle itself was choosing sides. And it chose the primal alpha. The blue-white light from the awakening stone pulsed in rhythm with Amarok's heartbeat, and as it did, something unexpected happened. The golden radiance surrounding the pup intensified, merging with the ancient light from below, and suddenly the air itself seemed to tear open. Malphaz gasped as images flooded his mind, not memories, but visions forced into his consciousness with crystalline clarity. He saw the birthing chamber 3 years ago, saw Queen Sylvana lying exhausted but alive. Saw 2 pups nestled against her chest instead of 1. No, he whispered, but the vision continued relentlessly. He watched as High Priestess Vora entered the chamber, dismissing the midwives with claims of performing a sacred blessing. Saw her produce a vial of dark liquid and force it down Sylvana's throat. Saw his mate's eyes go wide with betrayal before her body went rigid, her heartbeat slowing to nothing, every sign of life vanishing as the death-mimicking poison took hold. Saw Vora lift one of the crying pups, the one whose scent already carried hints of starfire and ancient oak, and press her hand against his tiny chest, dark magic flowing from her fingers like oil. The malefic shroud taking shape, wrapping around the innocent child, suppressing his true nature beneath a false scent of rot and decay. Saw her take the second pup and slip away through a hidden passage, leaving only the cursed one behind for Malphaz to find alongside his dead mate. Sylvana! Malphaz's roar shook the washroom. He finally managed to surge to his feet, breaking through the compulsion to submit through sheer force of rage and anguish. She's alive! My mate is alive! My king! Thuron looked up from the floor, confused and disoriented. Queen Sylvana died in childbirth, we all witnessed. We witnessed nothing but Vora's lies. Malphaz turned on the priestess with murder in his eyes. You poisoned her, made us think she was dead. Where is she? Where is my mate? Vora's face had gone ashen, her carefully maintained composure finally shattered completely. You shouldn't have been able to see that. The awakening stone shouldn't be able to project memories. It was only meant to. Answer me. Malphaz's claws extended fully, and despite the primal alpha's presence, his own considerable power as Alpha King blazed forth. Where is Sylvana? The priestess backed toward the wall, her personal guards uncertain whether to defend her or flee. She had to be removed, Vora said, her voice brittle. She would have protected the boy, prevented his exile. I needed her out of the way until... Until what? Until you could murder my son and install your own puppet heir. Malphaz advanced on her, fury radiating from every pore. Where is she? Amarok's small voice cut through the tension. The dark place, underground, I can feel her now. She's been calling for me, but I couldn't hear her until the heavy thing came off. Malphaz turned to his son, seeing the pup's eyes glowing even brighter, as if looking at something invisible to everyone else. Where, Amarok? Where is she? Below, the pup said, pointing downward. Deep below, where the cold stones cry, she's so tired, father, so tired and sad, and she's been dreaming of me. Shadowvale Dungeon, Thuron said grimly. The oldest cells, the ones we don't use anymore. They're beneath the north wing, 3 levels down. Malphaz whirled on his captain. Take your fastest runners. Now, bring her up carefully. If she's been sedated for 3 years, his voice broke. Just bring her to me, please. Thuron managed to fight through his instinctive submission enough to stand, swaying slightly. He grabbed 2 other guards and they stumbled from the washroom, their movements awkward as they fought against the primal alpha's overwhelming presence. The remaining guards watched Vora with new eyes, seeing not their spiritual leader but a conspirator, a poisoner, a woman who had torn apart the royal family for her own purposes. Why? Malphaz asked, his voice hollow now that the initial rage had burned through. Sylvana trusted you. I trusted you. Why destroy everything? Because the primal alpha would have destroyed more, Vora said, but her conviction wavered. My son deserves. Your son, Selith's sharp intake of breath drew everyone's attention. The second pup, you took him for yourself. He was worthless to the prophecy, Vora admitted, seeming to realize that denial was pointless now. Only one carried the primal bloodline. The genetic lottery that determines such things chose Amarok. But Kale was still royal blood, still strong enough to rule. Without the primal alpha's shadow over him, he could have been a fair king, a just king, a king who ruled without forcing every wolf to their knees. Where is he? Malphaz demanded. Where is my other son? Before Vora could answer, footsteps echoed in the corridor, running footsteps, accompanied by gasping breaths and urgent voices. Thuron burst back into the washroom, his face pale. My king, we found her. You need to come now. Bring her here, Malphaz ordered. She can't walk. She's been sedated so long her muscles are. Thuron swallowed hard. We're carrying her, but my king, she's awake. Barely, but awake. And she's asking for her pups. Plural. A stretcher appeared in the doorway, borne by 4 guards moving with careful synchronization. On it lay a female wolf so thin she was nearly skeletal, her once lustrous silver fur matted and dull. But her eyes, deep amber eyes identical to Amarok's, were open and aware. Sylvana, Malphaz breathed, rushing to her side. Her gaze focused on him slowly, as if seeing through layers of fog. Mal! Her voice was barely a whisper, cracked from disuse. Is it real, or am I dreaming again? It's real. He took her hand, careful of how fragile she seemed. You're alive. You've been alive all this time, and I thought... His voice broke. I'm so sorry. I should have known, should have checked, should have. The bobbies, Sylvana interrupted, her fingers tightening on his with surprising strength. Where are my bobbies? She took them both. I couldn't stop her. One of them is here. Malphaz looked toward Amarok, who stood frozen at the edge of the tub, his golden light pulsing erratically as emotions warred across his small face. Sylvana turned her head, following his gaze, and when her eyes landed on the glowing pup, something shifted in her expression. Recognition, but more than that, a bone-deep knowing that transcended 3 years of imposed unconsciousness. Starfire, she whispered, and tears began streaming down her gaunt face. My Starfire pup, I felt you being born, felt the power in you, knew what you were. She said you were an abomination, said she had to hide you, protect the kingdom from you. Her hand reached out, trembling. But I knew, even in the dreams, I knew you were special, knew you survived. Amarok took a hesitant step toward the stretcher, then another. The golden light around him softened, becoming warmer, less overwhelming. Mother! The word was tentative, uncertain. I have a mother. Yes, Sylvana's voice strengthened slightly. Yes, my sweet boy. You have a mother who has been trying to reach you every moment of every day, calling to you in dreams, hoping you could hear me. I heard whispers sometimes, Amarok said, moving closer. When I was in the tower, soft words telling me I wasn't alone. I thought I was imagining them. You weren't. Sylvana's hand finally touched his fur and she gasped. The shroud is gone. She actually broke the shroud. How? Selith stepped forward, bowing. The old soap, my queen, my grandmother's legacy. It was meant for this, to break dark magic and reveal truth. Moon Whisper, Sylvana breathed, recognition lighting her eyes. Your grandmother was Esra. She served my mother before the old order fell. She told me once that if the primal bloodline ever returned, her descendants would be there to protect it. And she was right, Selith said softly. Sylvana pulled Amarok closer with trembling arms, holding him against her chest despite her weakness. The pup pressed against her, 3 years of loneliness and longing pouring out in silent tears. The golden light surrounded them both, and for a moment, mother and son existed in their own world, reunited after an eternity of forced separation. Then Sylvana's eyes opened, focusing on Vora with sudden intensity. Where is my other son? Where is the pup you stole from me? Safe, Vora said defensively. I raised him well, gave him everything. You gave him lies. Sylvana's voice cracked with fury despite her weakness. You stole him, made him yours. What did you name him? Kale, Vora admitted. His name is Kale. That was my father's name, Sylvana whispered. You even stole that from me. The door opened again, and a young wolf stepped through. Perhaps 12 years old in human terms, with dark fur and Vora's sharp features, but Sylvana's amber eyes. He stopped, staring at the scene before him with growing horror. Mother, Kale looked at Vora. What's happening? They said you needed me, but... His gaze fell on Sylvana. Who is that? That, Amarok said quietly, still pressed against Sylvana, is our mother, your real mother. Kale's face went white as the truth crashed down on him. Kale stood frozen in the doorway, his world fracturing with every passing second. The primal alpha's scent washed over him, forcing his knees to bend slightly. But the psychic shockwave from the awakening stone had already shown him enough truth to make his body's submission the least of his concerns. He'd seen it too, not as clearly as Malphaz perhaps, but enough. Flashes of memory that weren't his own, a birthing chamber, 2 crying pups, his mother, his real mother, reaching for him before darkness claimed her. And Vora, the woman he'd called mother for 12 years, taking him away into shadow. Tell me it's not true. His voice came out strangled, desperate. He looked at Vora, pleading with her to deny everything, to make the visions lies. Tell me I'm your son. Tell me I'm the rightful heir. Tell me. You are my son, Vora said fiercely, moving toward him. In every way that matters. I raised you, taught you, loved you. Blood means nothing compared to... Blood means everything, Kale's shout echoed off the stone walls. You told me that. You said bloodlines determined strength, determined right to rule, determined everything about who we are. He gestured wildly at Amarok. And now I find out my real mother is lying on a stretcher, that my twin brother was locked in a tower while I slept in silk sheets, that everything you told me was a lie. Not everything. Vora's hands reached for him, but he stepped back. I did love you, I do love you. I needed you to be strong, to be ready to rule, to take his place. Kale's eyes fixed on Amarok with a mixture of horror and fascination. The smaller pup still pressed against Sylvana's chest, his golden light pulsing softly. That's what all the training was for, wasn't it? All the lessons about strength and leadership and making hard choices. You were preparing me to be king after you had him killed. Kale, please. Were you going to tell me? His voice broke. Ever. Or was I supposed to live my whole life not knowing I had a brother, that I had a real mother, that my entire existence was built on theft and lies? Sylvana shifted on the stretcher, her weak voice somehow cutting through the tension. Cale, your name is Cale. She studied his face with hunger, drinking in details she'd been denied for 12 years. You have your father's jaw, your grandfather's eyes, you're so tall, so strong. Cale's composure crumbled. You don't know me, you can't, you're a stranger, she's my mother. But the words sounded hollow even to him. I carried you for 9 months, Sylvana said softly. Felt you kick and move and grow, sang to you before you were born, held you for 17 minutes before she took you away. Tears streamed down her gaunt face. 17 minutes is all I got with you, but you're still my son. You've always been my son. This is manipulation, Vora interjected sharply. She's playing on your emotions, trying to turn you against the only mother you've ever known. The only mother I've ever known is a liar and a poisoner, Cale rounded on her. You killed her, or tried to, you stole me, you put some kind of curse on my brother. How can you stand there and act like you're the victim? Because I was trying to save the kingdom. Vora's composure finally shattered completely. Don't you understand? She pointed at Amarok, is a primal alpha. Do you know what that means? In 10 years, he'll be able to bend every wolf in this kingdom to his will. In 20, he could conquer neighboring territories just by walking through them. In 30, he'd be a living god with no one strong enough to oppose him. So you decided to make me king instead, Cale said bitterly. Because I'm weak enough to control. Because you're strong enough to lead without becoming a tyrant. Vora grabbed his shoulders, her ancient hands surprisingly strong. I saw what the primal alphas became. The memories have been passed down through my bloodline for 1,000 years. They started with good intentions, but power that absolute corrupts absolutely. They ended up treating other wolves like cattle, breeding programs, and culling, and... That was them, Cale interrupted. Not him, he's 3 years old. He hasn't done anything except suffer. Yet, the word hung in the air like a curse. He hasn't done anything yet. Amarok finally spoke, his child's voice still carrying that resonance that made the stones hum. I heard everything. From the tub, I heard what you said about me. He looked at Cale with those blazing amber eyes. You didn't know about any of it. You didn't know about the tower or the cold or the guards who hurt me. You thought I was supposed to be exiled because I was cursed. Cale nodded slowly, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. She told you I was dangerous, Amarok continued. That I would hurt people, make the kingdom sick. He tilted his head, considering. Maybe she's right. Maybe I will become bad. The power feels big inside me, really big. And I'm angry at Father for hurting me, angry at the guards, angry at everyone who said I smelled wrong. That's natural, Sylvana whispered, stroking his fur. Anger at injustice is natural. But I'm not angry at you. Amarok's gaze remained fixed on Cale. You didn't know, I don't blame you. The words fell like stones into still water, sending ripples through everyone present. Malphaz, standing beside Sylvana's stretcher, felt something twist in his chest. Here was a child who'd been tortured for 3 years, who just discovered the conspiracy that had stolen his childhood, who possessed power that could destroy them all, and his first instinct was compassion. You should blame me, Cale said, his voice thick with emotion. I had everything while you had nothing. I was warm while you froze. I was loved while you were hated. Even if I didn't know, even if it wasn't my fault, I still benefited from what was done to you. Does that mean you're bad? Amarok asked with the simple logic of a child. Cale opened his mouth, then closed it. I don't know. Mother, Amarok caught himself, looking at Vora. She raised you, taught you things, loved you even if she did bad things to other people. Does that mean the love wasn't real? I don't know, Cale repeated, but his eyes were filling with tears. I think, Amarok paused, seeming to struggle with concepts too large for his young mind. I think people can do really bad things and still love someone, and I think people can have good lives built on bad things without being bad themselves. He took a tentative step toward Cale. You're my brother, that's what Mother said. I always wanted a brother. The simple statement broke something in Cale. He dropped to his knees, not from the primal alpha's compulsion, but from the sheer weight of emotion. I don't deserve your forgiveness. I should have asked questions. Should have wondered why a prince was locked away. Should have. You were a child too, Seleth said quietly. Children believe what they're told by the adults they trust. She's right, Malphaz added, his own voice rough with barely contained emotion. He looked at his sons, both of them, together for the first time in their conscious memory. I was the adult. I was the king. I should have questioned, investigated, demanded proof. Instead, I believed every word Vora said and condemned my own son to suffering. He looked at Amarok. You show more wisdom at 3 years old than I've shown in my entire reign. I just don't want to be alone anymore, Amarok said simply. Being alone in the tower was the worst part, worse than the cold or the smell or the guards, just being alone. Kale slowly extended his hand toward his twin. You don't have to be alone, not anymore, I don't. I don't know how to be a brother, but I want to learn, if you'll let me. Amarok looked at the offered hand, then at Sylvana, who nodded encouragingly despite her tears. The small pup reached out and took Kale's hand, and the moment their fingers touched, the golden light pulsed once, not aggressive or overwhelming, but warm, welcoming. You feel like me, Amarok said with wonder. Not the power part, but underneath, you feel like the same. Twins, Sylvana whispered. You shared my womb for 9 months. You're part of each other in ways that go deeper than blood. Vora watched this reunion with an expression that cycled through rage, grief, and finally resignation. Her carefully constructed world had collapsed entirely. The son she'd raised was choosing the brother she'd tried to destroy. The king she'd manipulated was awake to her lies. The mate she'd poisoned had survived. Every piece of her plan had fallen apart. This isn't over, she said quietly, but the fight had gone out of her voice. The power will still corrupt him. Time will prove me right. Then we'll deal with that if it happens, Malphaz said firmly. But we'll do it as a family, all of us, together. He reached out and pulled both boys close, and after a moment's hesitation, Kale allowed it. Sylvana's hand joined theirs from the stretcher, and for the first time in 3 years, the shattered royal family began the long, painful process of becoming whole. But in the shadows at the edge of the room, Vora's personal guards exchanged worried glances. Their priestess had failed, but she'd also taught them well. And loyalty, once given, was not easily revoked, even when it was built on lies. The true battle for the kingdom's soul was only beginning. Captain Thuron was the first to voice what everyone was thinking. The soap. He looked at Seleth with new suspicion. That wasn't ordinary soap. How does a village maid come to possess an artifact powerful enough to break blood magic cast by a high priestess? Seleth had been hopping to avoid this conversation, but she'd known it was inevitable the moment the shroud dissolved. She straightened from her kneeling position, though the primal alpha's presence still made her movements deferential, instinctive. It wasn't chance, she admitted quietly. None of this was chance. Malphaz, still holding both his sons, turned his attention to her. His eyes narrowed. Explain. My full name is Seleth Moonwhisper, she said, and several of the older guards gasped at the surname. My grandmother was Esra Moonwhisper, last of the seer line that served the primal alphas before the fall. The Moonwhispers were destroyed, Thuron said, hunted down and executed alongside the last primal alpha 1,000 years ago. Not all of us. Seleth's hands trembled slightly, but she forced herself to continue. A handful escaped, went into hiding. My bloodline has been waiting, watching, preparing for 10 centuries, because my grandmother's grandmother's grandmother, going back 30 generations, saw what was coming, saw that the primal bloodline would return. Convenient prophecy, one of Vora's guards muttered. Not convenient, inevitable. Seleth met Malphaz's gaze steadily. The primal alpha gene doesn't die, it just sleeps. It can skip 50 generations, 100, waiting for the right combination of bloodlines to reawaken it. My ancestors knew it would eventually resurface, and they knew when it did, the old powers would move to destroy it again. The old powers? Sylvana asked from her stretcher. You mean Vora's bloodline? The Shadowbinders. Selith nodded toward the disgraced priestess. That's what they were called in the ancient texts. They were the ones who orchestrated the fall of the primal alphas, who convinced the other clans that such power was too dangerous to exist. They've been monitoring royal bloodlines ever since, watching for the gene to resurface. Vora's expression remained stony, but she didn't deny it. My grandmother received the vision 17 years ago, Selith continued. She saw King Malphaz's mate, though she didn't know your name then, carrying twins. Saw one of them glowing with the star fire, marked by destiny. She also saw the Shadowbinder priestess moving to suppress the child, to hide him until he could be eliminated. So she sent you here to stop it, Malphaz said slowly. But why wait 3 years? Why let my son suffer if you knew what was happening? Because I didn't know, Selith's composure cracked slightly. The vision showed what would happen, but not when. My grandmother died 2 months ago, and her last words were to take the sacred soap and seek employment in the castle. She said I would know the moment when I saw it. Her eyes moved to Amarok. When I saw him collapsed in that room, burning with fever, covered in filth, the words came back to me. When darkness has taken a false shape, I finally understood. The soap was made for this purpose, Sylvana asked. Made 1,000 years ago, Selith confirmed. Before the last primal alpha fell, the Moonwhispers created 12 bars of the sacred soap, infused with silver from a fallen star and herbs that only grow under the full moon. Each bar was given to a different bloodline with instructions to guard it, pass it down, wait for the return. She looked down at her hands. 11 of those bloodlines failed, lost the soap, forgot the purpose, or were wiped out entirely. My grandmother's line was the last. The final bar of soap, the final chance. The washroom fell silent as everyone absorbed this. The idea that Amarok's revelation had been orchestrated across a millennium, that generations of Moonwhispers had lived and died protecting a bar of soap for this exact moment. It was almost too vast to comprehend. You said your grandmother saw a prophecy, Malphaz said carefully. What else did she see? What else is coming? Selith hesitated, and that hesitation sent a chill through the room. Tell me, the king commanded. The vision didn't end with the shroud breaking, Selith said slowly. It continued forward. My grandmother saw the primal alpha rising during the kingdom's darkest hour. She saw, Selith's voice dropped to barely a whisper. She saw the devourer awakening. The name meant nothing to the younger wolves, but the older ones, those who'd paid attention to ancient history, went pale. Thuron made a warding gesture, an old superstition meant to deflect evil. That's a myth, Malphaz said, but his voice lacked conviction. A cautionary tale about what happens when bloodlines become corrupted. The primal alphas were created as a defense, Selith said. That's what the old texts say. Before there were kingdoms, before there were clans, something else existed in these lands. Something that fed on wolves, that corrupted them from within, that turned pack against pack until the species nearly went extinct. The devourer, Sylvana whispered. My mother used to tell stories, a thing that lived in shadows and fed on fear and discord. The first primal alpha was born to fight it, blessed by the moon goddess herself with power that could stand against the darkness. And when the primal alphas fell, Selith continued, the devourer went back to sleep, but it didn't die. My grandmother's vision showed it stirring again, drawn by, she paused, choosing her words carefully. Drawn by the same discord and fear that nearly destroyed the wolf clans the first time. The wars between kingdoms, the breakdown of the old ways, the weakening of pack bonds. It's been feeding on it all, growing stronger while we grew weaker. How long? Malphaz demanded. How long until this thing fully awakens? The vision wasn't clear on time, but there were signs. The first was the return of the primal alpha bloodline, which we've now seen. The second would be the shadow veil opening, cracks in reality where the devourer's influence bleeds through. The third. The shadow veil has already opened, Vora interrupted, her voice hollow. 6 months ago in the Northern Territories. We kept it quiet to avoid panic, but entire packs have gone missing. Scouts reported seeing wrongness, reality twisted. Wolves turned inside out, but still living, still screaming. The washroom erupted in shocked exclamations. Malphaz rounded on the priestess. You knew about this and said nothing. I was trying to prevent it, Vora's mask cracked further. Don't you see? The ancient texts say the devourer is drawn to powerful presences, feeds on them. The primal alpha's awakening is like a beacon. It will call the thing directly to us. I was trying to remove Amarok before he could fully manifest, before he could draw the devourer's attention to the heart of the kingdom. Or, Selith said coldly, you were trying to ensure the kingdom had no defense when the devourer arrived. The primal alpha is the only power that can stand against it. Without him, we're helpless. The last primal alpha failed, Vora shouted. The devourer nearly killed him before the Shadowbinders intervened. What makes you think a 3-year-old pup will do any better? Because this time he won't be alone. Selith looked at Amarok, who'd been listening with wide eyes. The last primal alpha thought his power made him superior, made others beneath him. He fought alone, trusted no one, and nearly died for it. But this one, she smiled slightly. This one just forgave the brother who had everything while he had nothing. This one shows compassion to those who hurt him. This one understands that strength without heart is just tyranny. Amarok pressed closer to Sylvana, overwhelmed. I don't know how to fight a devourer. I don't even know what that means. You don't have to know yet, Sylvana murmured, holding him tight. You're still just a pup. But he won't stay a pup forever, Malphaz said grimly. And if what Selith says is true, if this thing is already awakening, we don't have much time. He looked at his son, both of them. We need to prepare, all of us. There's more, Selith said reluctantly. The prophecy mentioned 3 who must stand together when the darkness comes. The primal alpha, yes, but also the twin of shadow. Kale, Sylvana breathed. And the moon's daughter. Selith's hand moved to her chest. I didn't understand that part until today, but I think my grandmother didn't just send me here to break the shroud. She sent me here to stand beside him when the real battle begins. Thuron laughed bitterly. So we have a 3-year-old, a 12-year-old who just discovered his entire life is a lie, and a maid with a bar of soap. That's our defense against an ancient evil that nearly destroyed our species. No, Malphaz said firmly. We have a primal alpha who represents the moon's blessing, a brother who bridges the light and shadow, and a moonwhisper who carries the wisdom of ages. We have a kingdom that's been divided but can be united. We have truth where there were lies. He looked at each of them in turn. It may not be enough, but it's what we have, and we'll make it work. Outside, in the gathering dusk, something stirred in the northern territories. Reality cracked just a little wider, and through the gap, something ancient and hungry turned its attention south, toward the blazing beacon of golden light that had just announced itself to the world. The primal alpha had awakened, and the devourer had noticed. The castle guard moved to seize Vora, but she raised her hands and dark energy exploded outward, creating a barrier that threw them back against the walls. Her milky eyes blazed with desperate determination as she turned to face Amarok directly, ignoring the others. You think they'll protect you now? Her voice cut through the chaos like a blade. You think their guilt changes anything? The moment you become inconvenient, the moment your power frightens them more than their shame drives them, they'll turn on you again. Silence, Malphaz roared, but Vora's barrier held him at bay. Look at them, child. Vora gestured at the assembled wolves, all still on their knees or struggling to rise against the primal alpha's overwhelming presence. They submit because they have no choice. Your very existence enslaves them. Do you think that will breed love, loyalty? They'll resent you, fear you, and fear always turns to hatred eventually. Amarok's golden light flickered, uncertainty crossing his small face. I don't want them to be scared. Then you're a fool. Vora took a step closer, her voice dropping to something almost gentle. But you don't have to be. I was wrong to try to hide your power, wrong to suppress what you are. I see that now. But I was right about one thing: power like yours needs guidance, purpose, direction. Stay away from him. Sylvana tried to rise from the stretcher but fell back, too weak. Vora ignored her, focusing entirely on the pup. You've suffered, Amarok. 3 years in that cold tower. 3 years of rejection, of pain, of being told you were wrong and broken and cursed. That suffering is real. That pain is valid. And you have every right to be angry about it. He's a child, Selith protested. You can't. I'm speaking to the primal alpha, Vora snapped, and he's old enough to understand truth. She crouched down to Amarok's level, her eyes locked on his. They hurt you. Your father planned to exile you to die in the wilderness. The guards tormented you for sport. The servants refused to touch you. For 3 years, you were treated as less than nothing. Amarok's glow intensified, responding to the emotions her words stirred. It hurt, he whispered. It hurt so much. I know. Vora's voice was almost hypnotic now. And that pain doesn't just disappear because they suddenly feel guilty. The memories remain. The scars remain. Every cold night, every cruel word, every moment of loneliness, it's all still there inside you, isn't it? The pup nodded slowly, tears beginning to stream down his face. Then use it, Vora urged. I can teach you how. I know the old ways, the techniques the ancient primal alphas used to channel emotion into raw power. Your rage, your pain, your suffering, it can all become strength, unbreakable strength, the kind of power that ensures no one will ever hurt you again. She waved her hand and dark energy coalesced into images, visions that hung in the air like living paintings. Amarok saw himself grown, magnificent and terrible, standing atop a mountain while kingdoms spread before him. Saw other wolves bowing not from compulsion but from genuine awe and fear. Saw himself safe, protected, untouchable. This could be your future, Vora whispered. Not a king who serves his kingdom, but a god who shapes the world to his will. No more pain, no more fear, no more being vulnerable to others' cruelty. Amarok stared at the visions, his small chest rising and falling rapidly. The golden light around him began to darken at the edges, tinged with red, the color of rage, of vengeance, of justified fury seeking outlet. Yes, Vora breathed, seeing the shift. You feel it, don't you? The rightness of it. They deserve your wrath, your father who rejected you, the guards who tortured you, every wolf who turned away in disgust. They all deserve to feel even a fraction of what you felt. No, Malphaz said desperately. Amarok, please, I know I failed you. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. But don't let my mistakes turn you into. Into what? Amarok's voice was still childlike, but edged with something harder. Into someone who hurts people, like you hurt me. The red tinge in his glow spread further. Maybe I should lock you in the tower for 3 years, leave you in the rain, tell you that you smell wrong, see how you like it. The visions shifted, showing Malphaz in the North Tower, showing the guards who'd tormented him suffering similar fates, showing the kingdom transformed under absolute rule, where no one dared to show cruelty or weakness. Justice, Vora said, her voice silk smooth. Not revenge, justice for what was done to you. And prevention, ensuring no one can ever do such things again. That's not tyranny, that's protection. Kale stepped forward, moving past the dark barrier that seemed to part for him, the twin of shadow, able to walk through shadows that stopped others. Brother, he said quietly, I understand the temptation. I've been angry too, learning how my life was built on lies. But this, he gestured at the visions, this isn't justice. It's just more pain. You don't know what it was like, Amarok said, his voice cracking. You had everything while I had nothing. You're right, I don't know. Kale knelt beside his twin. But I know what it's like to discover that the person you trusted most lied to you about everything. And my first instinct was rage too. Part of me wanted to hurt her back, to make her feel what I felt. He glanced at Vora. But that wouldn't actually make me feel better. It would just make me into someone I don't want to be. The weak speak of mercy, Vora interjected smoothly. The strong take what's owed to them. Power built on pain only creates more pain. Selith's voice rang clear, cutting through the temptation like a bell through fog. My grandmother told me that. She said the last primal alpha fell not because he was weak, but because he let his suffering turn him cruel. Every wound he'd received, he repaid tenfold. Every slight, he answered with destruction. And in the end, he was so consumed by rage that when the devourer came, he couldn't see the difference between enemy and ally. Amarok turned toward her, the red and gold in his aura warring with each other. But they hurt me. Yes, Selith didn't try to minimize it. They did, and that was wrong, profoundly, inexcusably wrong. You have every right to your anger, to your pain, to your sense of betrayal. Then why shouldn't I? Because you can be different. Selith moved closer, carefully, as if approaching a wounded animal. The last primal alpha let his pain define him, let it consume him until there was nothing else left. But you're already different. You forgave Kale when you had no reason to. You showed compassion when you could have shown contempt. That's not weakness. That's strength of a kind Vora doesn't understand. Sentiment, Vora scoffed. Pretty words that mean nothing when the darkness comes. They mean everything, Sylvana said from her stretcher, her weak voice somehow carrying. Amarok, my sweet boy, look at me. The pup turned toward his mother, and the red tinge in his aura flickered. You've been hurt, Sylvana continued. Terribly, cruelly hurt by people who should have protected you. And if you choose vengeance, if you choose to let that pain turn you into something hard and merciless, I'll still love you. You'll still be my son. But you'll also be alone in a way that goes deeper than any tower. I was already alone, Amarok whispered. You were, but you don't have to be anymore. Sylvana extended her trembling hand. You have a choice now that you didn't have before. You can use your power to make others feel your pain. Or you can use it to ensure no one else ever has to feel what you felt. One path leads to strength built on fear. The other leads to strength built on something far more powerful. What? Amarok asked, his child's mind struggling with concepts too large for his age. Love, Malphaz said, his voice rough. She means love, and I know I have no right to speak of it after what I did, but your mother is right. The power to inspire fear is nothing compared to the power to inspire loyalty. Real loyalty, freely given, not compelled by your presence. The visions Vora had conjured began to flicker and fade as Amarok's attention shifted away from them. The red in his aura receded slightly, the gold growing stronger again. I don't know how to do that, he admitted. How to be strong without being mean, how to have power without hurting people. None of us do, Kale said softly, but maybe we can figure it out together. Amarok looked at his twin, at his mother, at his father kneeling in shame, at Selith who'd risked everything to help him. The golden light pulsed once, twice, and the red edges began to dissolve like morning mist. No, he said finally, turning back to Vora. I don't want your teachings. I don't want to be angry all the time. Being angry hurts too much. The ancient priestess's face twisted with frustration. You're making a mistake. When the devourer comes, when your kingdom needs you to be ruthless and strong. Then I'll be strong, Amarok interrupted. But my kind of strong, not yours. The dark barrier around Vora flickered and died as her concentration broke. The guards surged forward immediately, seizing her arms. She didn't resist, but her eyes remained fixed on Amarok. You'll regret this, she said quietly. Mercy is a luxury the primal alpha can't afford. Maybe, Amarok replied, but being mean all the time sounds tired. I'm already tired from the tower. I don't want to be tired forever. And with those simple words, the 3-year-old pup made a choice that would echo through generations. The golden light surrounding Amarok blazed brighter than ever, but this time it carried warmth rather than overwhelming force. He turned away from Vora completely, dismissing her as if she were no longer relevant, and moved toward his mother's stretcher with purpose in his small steps. Mother, he said, placing his tiny paws on Sylvana's hand. You're still sick, inside your head. I can feel the fog there, the poison still trying to keep you asleep. Sylvana looked up at him with wonder. You can sense that. I can sense everything now. Amarok's eyes glowed brighter. All the hidden things, all the broken things, and I think I can fix some of them. Amarok, you don't have to, Malphaz started, but the pup shook his head. Yes, I do. Not because I have to prove anything, but because I want to. Because fixing things feels better than breaking them. He closed his eyes, and the golden light flowed from his small body into Sylvana's. It moved through her like liquid sunshine, seeking out the remnants of Vora's poison, the damage done by 3 years of forced sedation, the fragmented memories that had been locked away. Where the light touched, tissue regenerated, neural pathways reconnected, and the fog that had clouded her mind for so long began to lift. Sylvana gasped, her back arching as sensation and clarity returned in a rush. Her eyes, which had been dulled by drugs and suffering, suddenly blazed with the same amber intensity as her son's. Color returned to her gaunt face, and when she sat up, truly sat up without assistance, everyone in the washroom held their breath. "I remember," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I remember everything. The birth, both of you in my arms, her coming in with that vial, the taste of the poison, trying to scream but my throat wouldn't work, watching her take Kale while I couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't." She reached for Amarok and pulled him into a fierce embrace. "You just gave me back 3 years of my life." "Not all of it," Amarok said honestly. "The time is still gone, but at least the fog isn't hiding what's left." Malphaz watched this display of power, not destructive, not dominating, but healing, and felt something break inside him. This was what he'd tried to exile. This was what he'd condemned to death. Not a curse, but a blessing he'd been too blind to see. Amarok turned to face his father, and the king flinched from that golden gaze. But the pup didn't attack, didn't rage. He simply spoke truth. "You taught me that weakness deserves punishment," Amarok said, his child's voice steady. "That's what you told me through your actions, even if you didn't use those words. Every time you refused to look at me, every time you let the guards hurt me, every time you planned my exile, you were teaching me that the weak don't deserve love or mercy or even basic kindness." "I was wrong," Malphaz choked out, "about everything." "You were, but not about weakness deserving punishment." Amarok tilted his head, and the gesture was so innocent it made the words that followed even more devastating. "I was never weak, you were. You were weak because you believed her lies without questioning them. You were weak because you couldn't see your own son standing right in front of you. You were weak because you let fear make your decisions instead of love." The words fell like hammer blows. Malphaz dropped his head, unable to meet his son's gaze. "What can I do? How can I ever make this right?" "You can't," the simple statement hung in the air. "The past is done. The cold nights and the loneliness and the pain, they happened and nothing can unhappen them. But," Amarok paused, seeming to search for words, "you can be different going forward. You can be the father you should have been, starting now." "I don't deserve." "None of us get what we deserve," Seleth interjected quietly. "We get what we choose to create going forward." Malphaz looked around the washroom at the assembled witnesses. His mate restored, his 2 sons united, the maid who'd broken a millennium-old spell, the guards who'd seen everything. His authority, built on strength and certainty, had crumbled. But perhaps something better could be built from the ruins. "I can't be the king this kingdom needs," he said, the words tearing from him. "Not anymore. How can I lead when I couldn't even see the truth about my own son? How can anyone trust my judgment after this?" "Then step aside," Sylvana said, her restored voice carrying the authority she'd been denied for 3 years. "Not forever, perhaps, but until you've learned to see clearly again." Malphaz nodded slowly. "A council, multiple voices instead of one, checks against the kind of blind certainty that led me here." He looked at Sylvana. "With you as regent until Amarok comes of age, if you'll accept it." "I will," Sylvana said. "On one condition, Kale remains in line to the throne as well. Both my sons will be raised as heirs, both will have a place in this kingdom's future." "But I don't have the power he does," Kale protested. "I'm not." "You're my brother," Amarok interrupted. "And you said you wanted to learn how to be that. Maybe we can be heirs together. I don't want to do it alone." Kale's eyes filled with tears, and he nodded mutely. Captain Thuron cleared his throat. "And what of the High Priestess? Treason, use of forbidden magic, attempted murder of the royal heir. The law demands execution." All eyes turned to Vora, still held by guards, her ancient face impassive. She met Amarok's gaze without flinching. "Do it," she said. "Execute me. Prove that mercy is just another word for weakness." Amarok studied her for a long moment. "No." "My king, my prince," Thuron corrected himself. "She tried to kill you. She poisoned the queen. She stole." "I know what she did," Amarok interrupted. "But killing her just continues the cycle. She killed the last primal alpha because she was afraid of what he became. If I kill her because I'm afraid of what she might do, I'm no different. The cycle of cruelty ends with me." "Then what?" Malphaz asked. "We can't simply let her go free." "Strip her of title and power," Amarok said, with a certainty that belied his age. "Exile her to the northern territories where the Shadow Veil is opening. If she truly believes the Devourer is coming, let her face it firsthand. Maybe that will teach her that the real threat isn't me." Vora's composure finally cracked completely. "You're sending me to die anyway, just slowly instead of quickly." "I'm sending you to see the truth," Amarok corrected. "If you survive, if you learn something from facing real darkness instead of imagined threats, you can come back. The door won't be locked forever." The ancient priestess stared at him, something shifting behind her eyes. Not quite respect, but perhaps the beginning of understanding. "You're either the wisest primal alpha ever born, or the most foolish." "Maybe both," Amarok said simply. 3 days later, the castle had transformed. Vora was escorted to the northern border with provisions and a single guard, at her own request, surprisingly. Sylvana had taken over as regent, her first act establishing the Council of Voices that would advise and check royal power. Amarok had been moved from the North Tower to rooms adjacent to his mother's, with Kale taking chambers on the other side. Now, as the sun set on this new beginning, the brothers stood on the castle ramparts with Selith and their mother, looking out over the Blood Moon Kingdom. Amarok's scent, starfire and ancient oak, flowed across the land like an invisible banner, and throughout the kingdom, wolves responded. Not with fear or compulsion, but with something that felt almost like hope. "Do you think she was right?" Kale asked quietly. "About the Devourer coming?" "Yes," Selith answered before Amarok could. "The prophecy is clear. The darkness is waking." "Then we'll face it," Amarok said with the simple confidence of a child who'd survived the worst and discovered he was stronger than he knew. "Together." "Together," Kale echoed, placing his hand on his twin's shoulder. Sylvana pulled both boys close, and for the first time in 3 years, or perhaps for the first time ever, the royal family stood united. The scent of the primal alpha mixed with the evening air, carrying across valleys and mountains, reaching every wolf in the kingdom. And they remembered, in some deep ancestral part of themselves, what it meant to follow a true alpha. Not one who ruled through fear or compulsion, but one who'd chosen compassion when vengeance would have been easier. The North Tower stood empty now, its door left open to let the wind blow through, clearing away 3 years of suffering. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The Devourer still stirred in the north, the kingdom still needed healing, and Amarok still had to learn what it meant to be both a child and a legend. But tonight, under the rising moon, a pup who'd been told he was cursed stood on the ramparts and knew himself beloved. The scent that had once marked him as broken now announced him as whole. And for the first time in a millennium, the primal alpha walked among wolves not as a tyrant to be feared, but as a beacon of what strength tempered with compassion could become. The story of the Shadow Heir had only just begun, but its first chapter closed with a truth that would reshape the kingdom. Sometimes the greatest power lies not in the ability to destroy, but in the courage to heal. And sometimes the strongest among us are those who choose mercy even when cruelty would feel justified. Amarok looked up at the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky, his golden eyes reflecting their light, and whispered a promise to himself and to the world. "I will be different. I will be better." And in the depths of the north, where shadows crawled and reality cracked, the Devourer felt that promise like a challenge. And for the first time in centuries, it knew true opposition was coming. Amarok's journey from the cold tower to the castle ramparts reminds us that even in our darkest moments, we have the power to choose compassion over cruelty. If this story touched your heart, subscribe and join our pack. Because stories like these, stories about broken things becoming whole, deserve to be shared. Hit that subscribe button and let's discover more tales of hope together. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in my next story.